Chapter 13, the lymphatic system and immunity. The lymphatic system includes cells, tissues, and organs that defend the body against any hazards. These cells are lymphocytes. The vessels are called lymphatic vessels or lymphatics. And lymphoid tissues and organs are scattered throughout the body. As you may recall, lymphocytes are one type of white blood cell. They are the primary cell of the lymphatic system, and they respond to invading pathogens, abnormal body cells, such as cancer cells, foreign proteins, such as the spike on the coronavirus. Most are produced and stored within lymphoid tissues and organs, but also produced in red bone marrow. They are surrounded by lymph, and lymph is liquid that resembles interstitial fluid for a reason. So you can see here the different lymph nodes named for the regions where they exist. We see two ducts, thoracic duct and right lymphatic duct. You see the lymphoid tissues, tonsils, thymus, spleen, MALT, which is mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue in digestive, respiratory, urinary, and reproductive tracts, and the appendix. So lymphatic vessels carry lymph from the outer extremities toward the center of the body, and they begin with lymphatic capillaries. Lymphatic capillaries are found in almost every tissue and organ and are closely associated with blood capillaries. Blood capillaries tend to leak fluid, that is, they're leaking the plasma. Once it's leaked out of the blood vessel, it's called interstitial fluid, and this interstitial fluid flows into the lymphatic capillary, and now it's called lymph. So you can see how these lymphatic capillaries are associated with the blood vessels, with these capillaries, and they are one way. It is not a round trip like the blood vessels. Lymphatic capillaries are lined by endothelial cells. They have an incomplete or missing basement membrane, and they do differ somewhat from blood capillaries. That is, they're one way. They originate as pockets instead of forming a continuous loop. They have larger diameters and thinner walls and look a little flatter and irregular. Now, they do have overlapping cells, we'll see in a second, and these act as a one-way valve so the interstitial fluid flows into the lymphatic capillary, not out. Also, you will get larger particles, solutes, flowing into the lymphatic capillary. And so these overlapping endothelial cells act as one-way valves. Lymph flows from lymphatic capillaries into larger vessels toward the body's trunk. The larger vessels contain valves, and the valves bulge a little bit. There's low pressure in these lymphatic vessels, so the valves prevent backflow. Areas without a blood supply, or avascular areas, have no lymphatic capillaries, such as the cornea of the eye. Other areas without lymphatic capillaries, red bone marrow, and the central nervous system. I have left the review questions in so you can pause the video here, answer them, and check your answers at the back of the book. Which of the following is not associated with lymphatic capillaries? Found in all the body's tissues and organs. Do you remember where it's not found? They mentioned a certain avascular region of the eye. Which of the following components of the blood is commonly found in lymph? White blood cells. Do you remember what type of white blood cell? Blood is confined to the vessels of the cardiovascular system. However, the water of the plasma and solutes are constantly moving into the surrounding interstitial fluid as exchange occurs, and capillaries can get a little leaky. It becomes interstitial fluid and then will drain into the lymphatic vessels. This means that there is continuous recirculation of that interstitial fluid, and this helps control nutrients and wastes and toxins. It helps maintain the blood volume if that leaked plasma is returned to the blood system. And it alerts the immune system to infections in peripheral tissues. Arteries carry blood away from the heart and into the tissues of the body. Capillaries are the smallest and most delicate blood vessels. All exchange between the blood and interstitial fluid occurs at capillaries. At capillary networks, blood pressure forces water and small solutes out of the bloodstream and into the surrounding interstitial fluid. Lymph forms as interstitial fluid enters the lymphatic vessels. Lymphatic vessels form a network that return the lymph to the large subclavian veins near the heart. Veins carry blood from the capillary beds to the heart. Superficial and deep lymphatics converge to form larger vessels, lymphatic trunks, which empty into collecting vessels called the thoracic duct and the right lymphatic duct. And you'll see the cisterna chyli is an expanded chamber at the base of the thoracic duct. So the drainage from the right upper half of the body goes to the right lymphatic duct, and the left upper half of the body and the entire lower body drains into the thoracic duct. The thoracic duct collects lymph from the body inferior to the diaphragm and the left side of the body superior to the diaphragm, and it empties into the left subclavian vein. The right lymphatic duct collects lymph from the right side of the body superior to the diaphragm, and it empties into the right subclavian vein. So you can see the cisterna chyli here. It receives lymph from the inferior part of the abdomen, the pelvis, and the lower limbs from these two branches here and this branch there. And up here is the thoracic duct and the right lymphatic duct, and they enter into the subclavian vein. So what happens is all of the lymph drains upward from our arms and legs into the right lymphatic duct or the thoracic duct, and then they re-enter, this lymph will re-enter the bloodstream. Lymphedema is caused by blocked lymphatic drainage. What happens then is the interstitial fluid will accumulate and you'll have swollen areas, usually limbs. The swelling may become permanent and connective tissue loses its elasticity. And not only that, but if the interstitial fluid is not constantly being recycled, toxins and pathogens can accumulate. Into what blood vessels does lymph empty? The right and left subclavian veins. Which lymphatic vessel carries lymph from most of the body back to the blood? The thoracic duct. About 20 to 40% of leukocytes are lymphocytes. And there are three classes of lymphocytes: T cells, B cells, and NK cells, which stands for natural killer cells. All classes of lymphocytes are sensitive to antigens. An antigen is anything that enters the body that shouldn't be there. A pathogen, a part of a pathogen, pieces of bacteria, foreign substances, and most of these antigens are proteins. and this antigen will stimulate an immune response. T cells are the majority of the lymphocytes, and there are three categories of T cells. Cytotoxic T cells, which directly attack foreign cells or body cells infected by viruses, and this is called, when there's a direct attack, it's called cell-mediated immunity. Helper T cells stimulate activation and function of T cells and B cells. And suppressor T cells prevent too much activation because this immune system is very sensitive, and this prevents too much sensitivity of the immune system. B cells are 10 to 15% of the circulating lymphocytes. These B cells will differentiate into cells called plasma cells, which will make antibodies. So they are responsible for antibody-mediated immunity. Some B cells will become memory cells instead of plasma cells, and so they will stay in your blood forever and respond more quickly the second time you're infected with an antigen. Natural killer cells are about 5 to 10% of the lymphocytes, and they will attack foreign cells, body cells infected with viruses, cancer cells. These natural killer cells are constantly monitoring peripheral tissues. This is called immunological surveillance. Lymphopoiesis is lymphocyte production. This involves the red bone marrow, the thymus, and peripheral lymphoid tissues. Red bone marrow primarily in maintaining normal lymphocyte populations. Lymphopoiesis in red bone marrow begins with lymphoid stem cells. One group of these stem cells migrates to the thymus, and a second group stays in the red bone marrow. And the ones in the red bone marrow will divide to become B cells. So you can think of B cells as bone. And these B cells will mature and move into the lymph nodes, spleen, and other lymphoid tissue. And the NK or natural killer cells, which will mature and migrate throughout the body, patrolling peripheral tissues during immune surveillance. The blood-thymus barrier isolates stem cells from the general circulation. The thymic hormones stimulate the lymphoid stem cells to divide, producing T cells. So think of the T cells as thymus. T cells are produced and differentiate in the thymus, and then they re-enter the bloodstream when they're mature. They will travel to the red bone marrow and peripheral tissues. Stem cells exist in the red bone marrow, and migrated B cells and T cells maintain their ability to divide. What is going to happen is they will produce daughter cells that are identical, and this is how we develop our immune system. Which of the following is not one of the classes of lymphocytes? Phagocytic cell.